You just signed the paperwork. The pen is still in your hand. As of this morning, you own a McDonald's. Not the company, not the stock. One restaurant. The golden arches outside are the same ones 9 out of 10 people on the planet could draw from memory. And for the next 20 years, this building is yours to run. The first invoice on your desk has nothing to do with burgers. It's your initial franchise fee, $45,000, paid in a single lump sum the moment the doors are ready to open. It feels almost small compared to what people imagine McDonald's costs. That's the point. $45,000 is not the price of the business, it's the price of admission. Here's what the admission actually costs. Building this restaurant from the ground up, with the equipment, the signage, the opening inventory, and enough working capital to survive the first few months, lands somewhere between $1.4 and $2.7 million. That range exists because no two locations are identical. A satellite location inside a mall costs almost nothing to compare with a full traditional restaurant on a busy corner with a double drive-thru. But if you want the real thing, the one with the playground or the sleek modern dining room, 7 figures is the starting line, not the ceiling. And that's before your first customer orders a single fry. Now for the part that made you want this in the first place. This isn't a business you have to convince anyone to trust. The average traditional McDonald's in the United States brings in around $4 million a year in sales. $4 million from a building the size of a large living room, staffed mostly by teenagers and part-timers, selling items that cost a few dollars each. That volume is the entire reason this franchise is worth owning. You're not selling luxury, you're selling repetition at a scale almost no independent restaurant owner could ever build on their own. Walk through where that volume comes from. The counter and the drive-thru carry most of it, and the drive-thru alone can account for the majority of transactions at a typical location. Breakfast is quietly one of the strongest hours of the day, a high-margin window most customers don't think twice about. Delivery apps have added a new lane of orders that didn't exist a decade ago, sales that never require a single parking spot outside your restaurant. And the value combos and limited time promotions you see in every commercial exist for one reason: to keep the line moving and the register ringing, even if each individual sale contributes a little less. None of this happens by accident. Every menu board, every promotional sticker on the drive-thru speaker, every app notification pushing a $2 breakfast deal was designed at the corporate level, tested across thousands of restaurants, and handed to you as a finished system. You didn't have to build a brand. You didn't have to teach an entire country what a Big Mac tastes like. You bought the right to plug your restaurant into a machine that already knows how to sell. That's the appeal sitting in front of you right now. A location that, on a good year, can outsell most independent restaurants 3 or 4 times over. Powered by a menu you didn't have to invent, and a customer base you didn't have to earn one review at a time. $4 million a year sounds like the beginning of a great story. Now watch how fast the story gets complicated. Every restaurant in the McDonald's system pays a service fee back to the company. For newer franchise agreements, that fee sits at 5% of gross sales, a full percentage point higher than what franchisees paid for roughly 30 years before it changed. On your $4 million restaurant, that's $200,000 a year sent to the corporation before you've covered a single one of your own costs. Then there's the marketing fund. Every location contributes at least 4% of gross sales into a shared advertising pool that pays for the national commercials, the jingles, the campaigns that make McDonald's impossible to forget. You don't get to opt out. Another chunk of that $4 million, gone, before it ever reaches your bank account. Between the service fee and the marketing fund alone, close to 9% of everything your restaurant sells is already spoken for. On $4 million, that's roughly $360,000 a year, walking out the door before payroll, before food costs, before rent. And here's the detail most people never think about when they picture owning a McDonald's: you don't own the land, and you don't own the building. McDonald's does. The corporation typically owns or holds the lease on the real estate itself and issues you what's called an operator's lease, the right to run a restaurant on land that will never belong to you. In exchange, you pay rent. not a flat number you can predict from a brochure, a moving target, often built as a percentage of your sales, layered on top of a base amount. Across the whole franchise system, that effective rent has ranged from close to nothing at the best performing locations to well over 30% of sales at the toughest ones. There is no single answer. There is only your lease, your sales, and your negotiating position when you signed. Every other cost of running the restaurant still has to come out of what's left. The crew working the grill and the registers, the managers who keep the shift organized, payroll taxes, insurance, repairs when a fryer breaks down at the worst possible hour, the electricity bill for a kitchen that never fully powers off. None of those costs are unique to McDonald's. They're the same costs any restaurant owner faces. What's unique is that you're facing them on top of a service fee and a marketing fund that an independent restaurant owner simply doesn't have. So picture the math on a restaurant doing the average $4 million a year. After paying for food, labor, insurance, repairs, utilities, and every other line item it takes to keep a kitchen running, restaurants at this sales level report operating income of roughly $1 million before rent and before the service fee are factored in. That number looks enormous on its own. Then subtract the $200,000 in service fees. Then subtract a rent bill that, depending on your specific lease, could reasonably land somewhere in the range of $200,000 to $500,000 a year. What started as $1 million number can shrink to $300,000 or less, and that's still before loan payments on the $1 million plus you borrowed to buy the restaurant in the first place, before depreciation, before taxes. This is the reality check nobody puts on the brochure. The brand does something almost no independent restaurant can replicate. It guarantees you customers before you've served a single meal. But that guarantee has a price, and the price is structural. A fixed slice of every dollar you earn is already claimed by the corporation. And another unpredictable slice goes to rent on land you'll never own. You're not just running a restaurant, you're running it inside someone else's financial architecture. Now put yourself back on the floor on a Friday at 12:15 in the afternoon. The drive-through line wraps around the building. Every register is open. Every grill is full. This is the moment the whole business model depends on. Not a slow Tuesday morning, but exactly this. High volume, moving fast, no wasted seconds. Every car that leaves the line before ordering is lost revenue you'll never get back. Every employee call out on a day like this doesn't just cost you labor, it costs you the throughput the entire economics of this restaurant are built on. That's the real decision point of owning a McDonald's. You can't meaningfully raise prices without risking the volume that makes the model work in the first place. You can't shrink the marketing fund or negotiate away the service fee. What you can control is speed, staffing, and how well you protect that drive-through line during the 2 or 3 hours a day that generate a disproportionate share of your sales. The restaurants earning toward the higher end of that $4 million range aren't succeeding because they found a secret menu item. They're succeeding because they run the rush better than the restaurant down the street. Think about what that means for a slow Tuesday versus a packed Friday. On the slow day, the service fee and the rent don't go away. They're calculated on whatever you actually sell. So a quiet shift doesn't just mean fewer tips for your crew. It means the fixed weight of royalties and lease payments presses harder against a smaller number. On the packed Friday, the opposite happens. The same percentages apply, but there's more revenue underneath them to absorb the load. This is why the restaurants doing $4 million a year and the restaurants doing closer to $2 million a year aren't just different in size. They can be different in kind, one comfortably covering its fixed obligations with room to spare. The other spending most of the year working just to clear the royalty and the rent before anything is left over. That's the quiet test every franchisee is running, whether they think about it in these terms or not. How many transactions at what average ticket does this specific location need every single day just to cover the service fee, the marketing fund, and the rent? Before a single dollar counts as profit, it's not a number McDonald's publishes for you. It's a number your point of sale system quietly calculates every night when you close out the register. So, does the math actually work? At the average sales volume, this restaurant can plausibly clear a few $100,000 a year after royalties and rent, before debt service and taxes, a real number. But a fraction of the impressive top-line revenue that first caught your attention. At the low end of the sales range, with a tougher rent structure, that cushion can compress dramatically. At the high end, with a favorable lease, it can be genuinely strong. The brand doesn't promise you a specific outcome. It promises you volume, name recognition, and a proven operating system. And it charges you for all three every single day you keep the lights on. You're still holding the pen from this morning. The $45,000 you paid to get here was never really the price of the business. It was the entry fee into a much larger, much more demanding machine. One where the golden arches bring the customers through the door. And the real skill is making sure enough of what they spend actually makes it into your pocket.